trauma doesn't stay neatly contained in one area of life. It shows up in decision-making, in documentation gaps, in fear of institutions, in avoidance, being overwhelmed, and mistrust. When financial systems don't account for this reality, they don't just fail people, they re-traumatize them. Welcome to the Restoration Exchange Banking on Humanity. I'm Janine Casper. This podcast exists because financial systems are never just about money. They shape dignity, safety, access, and opportunity. And yet, too often, they are designed as if people don't exist. Today's episode is called Why Restoration Matters: Reclaiming Humanity in Our Financial Systems. Today, I won't be welcoming a guest speaker. As I reflect on this year and the wonderful gift of starting this podcast, I want to share a little about why I created the Restoration Exchange Banking on Humanity to lay the groundwork for the podcast I plan to do in 2026. Not as another fintech podcast, not as another banking conversation, but as a human bridge between systems and the people they impact. This podcast challenges the idea that financial systems are neutral, because they are not. They can restore trust or reinforce harm. They can open doors or quickly close them. Restoration, not efficiency alone, must guide how money moves through the world. Banking on Humanity is about choosing restoration, about centering real human stories, about cross-sector solutions, and about designing systems that heal instead of re-traumatize. Thank you for being here. When people hear the word banking, the conversation often turns technical very quickly and goes down a rabbit hole of products, compliance, innovation, risk models, efficiency ratios, return on assets, etc. However, we seldom discuss the human cost involved when we get it wrong. Those impacted by trauma hear the word banking, and the conversation quickly turns to words such as denied, excluded, abandoned, and other sentiments. That is the reality, the true reality of human cost. I created the Restoration Exchange Banking on Humanity because I've spent years at the intersection of finance, technology, nonprofit work, and lived experiences, and I've seen firsthand how systems that are built with good intentions can still cause harm when they don't account for real life. This session challenges the idea that financial systems like banking, credit, lending, and payments and policies are neutral, meaning that the systems are unbiased and objective. Because, as I mentioned earlier, they are not. Money systems shape dignity, safety, access, and opportunity. They determine how and who gets to participate fully in society and who is forced to navigate complexity, judgment, and exclusion just to survive. And too often, without malice, but with impact, these systems unintentionally reinforce trauma, exclusion, and harm. Banking on Humanity is about restoring trust, agency, and belonging. It's about centering real human stories. It's about cross-sector solutions. And it is about trauma-informed approaches to financial inclusion, not as a nice idea, but as a necessity. This podcast is not here to shame the banking and credit union industries. It is an industry that I have worked in for over 30 years and love what community financial institutions do in the markets that they serve. However, it is an opportunity for us right now to invite banking and credit union organizations to take on responsibility, to say we can do better and we must do better. One of the most important lessons I've learned in this experience that I've had over the last 6 years, and very much in deep work that has been done over the past 3 years, that policies don't impact spreadsheets. They impact people. Every product design decision, every compliance requirement, every eligibility rule, these choices land in real lives. They land with survivors trying to leave unsafe situations, with caregivers navigating systems on behalf of others, with youth aging out of foster care without financial scaffolding, with individuals returning from incarceration trying to rebuild dignity and stability, with families carrying generational trauma that they didn't create but are still asked to manage. That is why this podcast insists on human stories over abstract systems. Survivor voices, caregivers, youth, marginalized communities. Their experiences belong in the same room as industry leaders and policymakers, because without them, the picture is incomplete. In earlier episodes, we talked about what trauma looks like when it intersects with financial exclusion. Today, I want to move the conversation forward to why systems must change. Trauma doesn't stay neatly contained in one area of life. It shows up in decision-making, in documentation gaps, in fear of institutions, in avoidance, being overwhelmed, and mistrust. When financial systems don't account for this reality, they don't just fail people, they re-traumatize them. Trauma-informed finance is not a social add-on. It is a design imperative. It asks different questions. What does safety look like here? Where might shame or fear be introduced? How do we reduce harm while maintaining accountability? How do we transform community financial education programs to shift to economic literacy programs versus financial literacy? How do we quickly educate financial industry professionals on the difference between financial safety versus financial abuse? These are not soft questions. They are actually very responsible ones. We've finally are starting to address elder abuse and have created education for our financial institution professionals. Why should we not extend the same level of commitment to individuals who are or have experienced trauma, visible and invisible? Restoration is often framed as an individual journey. Resilience, healing, personal strength. And those things matter deeply. But restoration cannot rest on individuals alone. Systems need to embrace responsibility, and it's essential to invest in education that truly makes a difference. This means going way beyond just a workshop once or twice a month for an hour or two within the first 90 days that an individual is at a resource center beginning their journey. Instead, we should focus on building a strong infrastructure that supports a transformative economic journey, leading to greater financial stability, better health, and increased wealth for everyone. True restoration requires collaboration across sectors, financial institutions, nonprofits, technologists, fintechs, policymakers, and community advocates. No single sector can solve this alone, but together we can build systems that don't just manage risk, but restore trust. My voice in this podcast is part of a broader marketplace community called Unlocking Commerce in Business, created by Connie Davis, founder of Maiden Explorations. This community exists to question how commerce works, who it serves, and how it can evolve with intention. The Restoration Exchange, Banking on Humanity, contributes to that shared ecosystem by focusing specifically on the human and systemic intersections of banking, technology, and restoration. This podcast is my lane within a larger movement, and I am so very grateful to be part of a community that believes commerce can be reimagined with purpose. This podcast is not a commentary. It is a call to action, a call to imagine systems that restore people, not reduce them to risk profiles or account numbers, a call to build bridges instead of silos, a call to listen to voices that have too often been excluded from the design table. In future episodes, you'll hear courageous conversations, practical solutions, and system-level imagination. Let's reclaim humanity in finance, one conversation at a time. Because if finance is going to shape our future, then humanity must shape finance. The conversations I will continue to share on this podcast in the new year are sacred work. This willingness of my guests to share their truth is not something that I take lightly. Their courage may help you find language for your own pain. Their stories may offer hope for your healing. I hold deep gratitude for every guest who has stepped into this space with honesty and generosity. The Restoration Exchange exists because of that courage. As I leave you today, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. I also want to share a blessing with you and to wish you the happiest of holidays and an inspiring 2026. May every word spoken through this work carry light to you who have lived in shadows. May each story shared remind you of your worth and stir compassion in those with the power to give. May doors open, hearts soften, and resources flow where they are most needed. And may you be sustained with strength, peace, and joy as you walk your journey, knowing that you are absolutely never alone and that your labor is sowing restoration in you and for generations to come. Thank you for being a part of this community. Until next time, let's keep banking on humanity.